Hello and a very warm welcome. It's 9 p.m. IST and we are coming to you live from the WION headquarters in Noida, India. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Let's get started. American military installations in Europe are under imminent threat of a terror attack. What triggered this move? Why are these US military bases in Europe under heightened alert? We piece together the developments for you. We ask what triggered this move, what's brewing, and what is this in preparation of? How serious is the threat really? That's coming up as part of our top story tonight on Gravitas. And here's a look at what else is lined up for you on the show. We get you the latest from Nigeria, which has experienced ideological terrorism of the most unfathomable dimensions. We tell you all that you need to know. Iran has warned Israel of an obliterating war as tensions between Israel and Hezbollah spiral up, while the Arab League has now removed Hezbollah from its blacklist. What does that move imply? Where are things headed? A Chinese rocket suffered a catastrophic failure. This is the story of a massive explosion of a space rocket that launched accidentally and caught fire in China. We get you all the details. All this and more coming up tonight on Gravitas. Stay with us. American military installations in Europe are under imminent threat of a terror attack. I say that because over the weekend, several American military bases across Europe were put on a heightened state of alert. In fact, they are currently at FPCON Charlie. What is FPCON Charlie, you ask? It stands for Forced Protection Condition. According to the US Army, FPCON Charlie is a state of alert that is implemented when an incident occurs or intelligence is received that some form of terrorist action will take place or any personnel or facilities will be targeted. This is to ensure readiness and rapid response capabilities against any potential threats in the region, and it is designed basically to counter terrorists or other hostile adversaries. Its threat levels are designated as normal: Alpha, Bravo, Charlie and Delta. Charlie and Delta are the highest states of alert. On Sunday, the US Army garrison in Germany, where the US European Command or EUCOM is headquartered, issued the community-wide alert level for FPCON Charlie. As per reports, one US military facility in Western Germany even told some members to not wear their uniform off base or commute in civilian clothing. Now, this is big. It's because this is the second highest state of alert, and it raises some crucial questions. What triggered this response? Who is conspiring against the US military in Europe? What is the level of threat that has the US Army worried? As per recent news reports, US officials are worried. They say that such a threat level has not been seen in at least 10 years. And this escalated state usually indicates that the military has received an active and reliable threat. But what intelligence have they really gathered? We don't know, and the US European Command will not tell. In fact, the US European Command has been quite reserved in sharing details about the situation. However, they mentioned to American news outlets that they are constantly assessing various factors that impact the safety of US military communities abroad. And as part of this effort, they often take additional steps to ensure the safety of service members. For operational security reasons, they did not provide specific measures but emphasized their continued vigilance. At the moment, the specific intelligence that has caused concern has not been disclosed by the US European Command. Garrison officials in Stuttgart said that a variety of services would not be available because of the increased threat level. From Sunday until further notice, some of those reduced services included access to some eateries and on-post barbershops. Service members and others should anticipate significant delays at gate entry points because of increased security, as per the alerts. Military community members have been instructed to report any suspicious activity, monitor State Department travel advisories, and take precautions to minimize personal risk. Naturally, there is uncertainty surrounding the intelligence that triggered the heightened security measures. But European authorities have reportedly warned of a potential terror threat across the continent. Now, it's worth noting that Europe is about to host two major events, the Paris Olympics and the current European Football Championships in Germany. France is taking no chances ahead of the upcoming Olympic Games. They have raised their national security alert system to the highest level, in fact. French authorities are actively monitoring terrorist threats from organized groups and radicalized individuals. They warn that attacks targeting tourist locations, major sporting and cultural events, as well as other public areas that attract large numbers of civilians, may occur with little or no warning. Meanwhile, the German government has also stepped up security by bringing in 580 international police officers to assist with the efforts alongside German officers. They are preparing for all conceivable dangers, from Islamist terror to violent criminals and hooligans. Remember, Europe is currently in the midst of a war in Ukraine. During a summit in 2022, US President Joe Biden announced plans to deploy additional air defense, logistics, and engineer assets in Germany. Additionally, he announced that air defense capabilities will be added to forces in Italy. It was all part of America's response to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Since the war started, tensions between NATO countries and Russia have continued. NATO leaders have increasingly warned that direct conflict with Moscow is a realistic danger. And against the backdrop of increased tensions between NATO and Russia, as well as ongoing nuclear saber-rattling, there has been a significant increase in US military presence in Europe. Over 100,000 US service members are now stationed across the continent, and this includes the establishment of a permanent headquarters for the US 5th Army Corps in Poland that is aimed at improving command and control, interoperability with NATO allies, and overall defensive readiness. Let's not forget the multiple conflicts in West Asia. You see, since the war broke out in Gaza after October 7, US military officials have been warning about the possibility of a terror attack against the US, either at home or abroad. And this is mostly as a result of its support of Israel in its war with Hamas. Earlier this month, FBI Director Christopher Wray, in his opening testimony before the Senate, warned, "We have seen the threat from foreign terrorists rise to a whole new level after October 7. He warned that since the war broke out, Rogues gallery of foreign terrorist organizations call for attacks against Americans and our allies. Given those calls for action, he warned that America's most immediate concern has been that individuals or small groups will draw twisted inspiration from the events in West Asia and carry out attacks on American soil. He specifically mentioned the potential for a coordinated attack in the homeland, akin to the ISIS Khorasan attack we saw at the Russia Concert Hall in March. And with all that's going on, is the American military in Europe then preparing for a war? Why else would this level of threat be issued? Who is planning to attack the US military, if at all? And speaking of terrorism, let's now shift our focus to Nigeria, which has experienced ideological terrorism of the most unfathomable dimensions. On Saturday, a woman with a baby on her back carried out a suicide attack. You heard that right. The suicide bomber was a woman who had the baby strapped to her back when she detonated explosives in the middle of a wedding ceremony. It was one of the 3 terror attacks in the country on the same day. As the injured were taken to the hospital, a second female suicide bomber blew herself up at the hospital. Later, another attack was carried out by a female bomber disguised as a mourner at the funeral for victims of the wedding blast. All 3 incidents occurred in the city of Gwaza. At least 18 people were killed, 19 seriously injured. After the series of bombings, no one has claimed responsibility for the string of attacks, but the region has been scarred by more than a decade of violence by the jihadist group Boko Haram. Although Boko Haram has lost ground in recent years, jihadists continue to attack rural communities in Nigeria on a regular basis. But here's the disturbing truth about Boko Haram. In addition to carrying out deadly attacks, Boko Haram has repeatedly deployed women for suicide bombing attacks. Some of these female bombers are prisoners of the group who carry out the attacks under drug influence and coercion. In fact, Boko Haram's use of women as bombers increased following the abduction of over 276 female students between 16 and 18 years old from their school dormitories in April 2014. The Chibok girls' abduction, as it is remembered, prompted the global Bring Back Our Girls campaign, remember, as well as regularly using women to carry out deadly explosions. Boko Haram is also at the forefront of normalizing the use of children as suicide bombers. In recent years, the group's strategy has included stepping up child recruitment. Recruitment of child soldiers is the latest in the series of brutal and inhuman tactics deployed by Boko Haram since it started its insurgency a decade ago. Along with the mass murder of innocent civilians, the terror group has long engaged in mass abduction of schoolgirls and sexual enslavement of women. They recruit by abducting children. In fact, abductions have become a recurrent fixture in Nigeria, especially in the restive northern regions. The children are recruited and used in direct combat as sexual slaves and as suicide bombers, a grossly repugnant war crime. But it happens nonetheless. In many cases, the child used for the suicide bombing is between the ages of 5 and 8. Can you imagine that? In fact, the group has also relied on older children whose families have been killed during the conflict. The children being used as suicide bombers have absolutely no idea whatsoever what is going on. So then why can't Nigeria stop the abduction of children? Well, the answer to that, of course, is complex and is multi-layered, just like the crisis in the country. There is corruption There is a lack of cohesiveness in the security structure. There is no rapid response to the attacks. There is ineffective collaboration between the police and the military. As to the question of why women and children are used as suicide bombers, there are several reasons here. One being that they are far less likely to be searched. They can hide explosives under their clothing or inside handbags. In some cases, they have even strapped explosives onto their backs with infant children, as seen in the recent case. There are also reports of men dressing as women to slip through security more easily. For Boko Haram's terror recruitment efforts, women and children are more susceptible. The male terrorist leadership sees women and children in particular as expendable. Their vulnerability is their curse. For all these reasons, it's the children and the women who are Boko Haram suicide bombers. Experts say that complex, multi-layered issues in the country are at the heart of the worsening crisis. Remember, Nigeria is a country that is grappling with an economic situation that has all but nosedived. High inflation, rising youth unemployment, and the loss of currency valuation has pushed many in the country into criminality. It has compounded the country's problems and Boko Haram's reign of terror. This is just a ticking time bomb. While the use of child soldiers is nothing new in Africa, shouldn't regional governments do more to create better lives for children? On to France now. Fear, disappointment and uncertainty on the ground among the people. A far-right government becoming a real possibility after Sunday's first round election. What happens next? Where do things stand right now for Emmanuel Macron? Here's a detailed report.
It is 1940s France. The Second World War is scripting history while France is being invaded by Nazi Germany. An authoritarian government is reversing liberal policies, bringing conservative Catholics to the mainstream and reducing the media to a puppet. That was the last time the French tasted life under a far-right government. Cut to 8 decades later, another far-right party, a long-time pariah, is on course to win elections.
Ça fait vraiment peur. L'extrême droite, c'est un peu un choc parce que
It's scary. The far right is a bit of a shock. Because when we vote, obviously we expect that the results correspond to our choice. But it's a bit difficult for young people, that there's a party who's in the lead, who cares very little about us. The National Rally has claimed victory in the first round of elections. An absolute majority looks tough. So Marine Le Pen is staring at a few sleepless nights to cobble up an alliance. France's far-right party of National Rally is not what it used to be. It has openly supported racism and anti-Semitism in the past, but Le Pen has sought to clean up the image of the party. And the 28-year young face of Jordan Bardella is doing the magic.
The problem is that I can no longer differentiate between Macron and the far right. That's my problem. Because it's a bit the same economic policy.
The extreme left and centre followed in exit polls. Their goal has shifted from wooing the voters to keeping the far right from power. The two factions have already decided to withdraw their candidates in regions where another candidate was better placed.
How the two other blocs, President Macron's bloc, centrist bloc, and the so-called Popular Front of the left, united together, are going to decide in the next election. There have been cases in which members of the centrist bloc have said they will stand aside to let the left win. And of course, the left leader, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, said yesterday that in cases where they came in third place, the left bloc would stand aside.
The clock is ticking, not only because the second round of polls is this Sunday, But bloodbath is expected in markets and on streets. French assets have taken a battering since snap elections were called. And streets of Paris saw protesters setting off flares right after Sunday's polls. The snap election was called by President Emmanuel Macron last month. Experts are calling it the worst gamble in French history. If the National Rally manages to come to power, Macron will still be the president, because parliamentary and presidential elections work separately in the country. But he will become a lame duck who will find himself helpless even if France is ungovernable. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
In recent weeks, China and its space program have been making headlines, some for good reasons, some for bad. In the latest incident, a major embarrassment came China's way. A rocket took off accidentally, only to end up exploding near a central Chinese city. A terrifying video of the incident has been doing the rounds. Our next report, getting you the complete lowdown. Take a look.
China's space program has been making rapid strides. Today, China is an undisputed space superpower, only second to the US. Chinese teams are now studying rock and soil samples brought from the far side of the moon. No nation so far has explored the moon's far side, the region that never faces the Earth. China landed a robotic craft there, collected samples and brought those samples to Earth. China won widespread appreciation for the same. However, there is the other side. China has a questionable safety and sustainability track record. Partially burnt up stages of Chinese rockets have fallen on its own villages. These rockets emit toxic yellow-red fumes of rocket fuels. These fuels are so deadly, even limited exposure can cause cancer or lead to certain death. This is a recent video of a rocket stage falling and terrified villagers fleeing to safety. This happens especially when China launches rockets from its spaceports situated deep inside their territory. All responsible nations dump similar partially burnt-up rocket stages in the deep sea. Here's the latest incident. Chinese firm Space Pioneer was test-firing a new rocket in the country's Henan province. They say this rocket, Tianlong-3, is comparable to the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Similar to the Falcon 9, Tianlong-3 is also powered by kerosene and liquid oxygen. In fact, this was a ground-based test of Tianlong-3. Rocket ground tests are very similar to a rocket launch. During a ground-based test firing, the rocket engines spew fire and smoke, but there is one big difference: the rocket will not lift off. This is because the rocket is restrained from taking off. Mechanical arms and clamps hold down the flaming rocket and don't permit it to fly off the ground. This is exactly where things went horribly wrong. There was a mechanical failure. The systems meant to prevent the rocket from lifting off failed. Within moments, the rocket lifted off. Amateur videos showed the rocket taking off to a few thousand feet. Moments later, the rocket engines shut down, and in less than 50 seconds, the rocket with all its remaining fuel hit the ground. It caused a massive fireball and explosion. Chinese authorities maintain that there were no casualties. The explosion took place not too far from the Gongyi County. This is a very unusual type of failure. Records show that a similar mishap last took place in 1952 when an American Viking 8 rocket broke free during a test firing. Needless to say, This setback would cause some delays to the development of China's privately built Tianlong-3 rocket. China is betting big on it, and it hopes to launch an exclusive Chinese fleet of internet beaming satellites, similar to Elon Musk's Starlink. Tianlong-3 is a massive rocket. It has a diameter of 3.8 meters and weighs 590 tons. It is said to be capable of lifting 17 tons of cargo to orbits that are 500 kilometers above the Earth.
What would an all-out Israel-Hezbollah war mean for the region? Would things head in that direction? These questions have dominated the discourse for a while now, and if the tensions do escalate further, how would things play out? Iran has issued a strong warning. It has warned that all resistance fronts would confront Israel if it attacks Lebanon. That basically refers to the grouping of Iran and its regional allies. The comment came from Iran's mission to New York. Let me tell you what else it said. Amid growing fears of a wider regional war, in a post on the platform X, the Iranian mission said, quote, it deems as psychological warfare the Zionist regime's propaganda about intending to attack Lebanon, quote unquote. And it added, quote, should it embark on full-scale military aggression, an obliterating war will ensue. All options, including the full involvement of all resistance fronts, are on the table, quote unquote. Let me say that again. It has warned of an obliterating war. And just have a look at what else is happening. These are developments that are making this warning all the more significant. You know what the Arab League has done? It has changed its position on Hezbollah. How, you ask? It has basically decided to remove Hezbollah from its blacklist. And why is that? Because according to them, conditions for establishing relations have been met. The member states agreed that the label of Hezbollah as a terrorist organization should no longer be employed. This is what the Arab League Assistant Secretary General Hossam Zaki said in a statement aired on Egyptian Al Qahira News. Here's what else has been said. Quote, in previous Arab League decisions, Hezbollah was designated as a terrorist organization, and this designation was reflected in the resolutions leading to the severing of communication based on these decisions, quote unquote. Now, this is a massive development that comes with serious implications. When you look at the regional context, it's a major move in favor of Hezbollah. But would that mean that Arab nations will attack Israel in case of an all-out Israel-Hezbollah war? And how would Israel respond? The thing is, the Arab League could now directly talk with the group. What these talks would be aimed at also attracts another set of questions. Could they be aimed at trying to dial down the tensions or preventing a regional war? These are some of the questions being asked. Just look at the way the tensions have spiraled up, steadily shot up. In the latest, Israel's military has said 18 soldiers were injured in a drone attack by Hezbollah, one of them seriously. As per the Israel Defense Forces, several drones were launched from Lebanon on Sunday afternoon, setting off sirens in the Galilee Panhandle and northern Golan Heights. In a statement released Sunday on its X account, Israel's army radio said the casualties came after the explosion of a Hezbollah drone launched from southern Lebanon. Hezbollah also announced that it had targeted the headquarters of the 91st Brigade north of the occupied territories in response to Israeli strikes against the resistance group. So tensions continue to rise in a dangerous manner. The question is, will these tensions boil over and result in a catastrophic war? How do Generation Z, our youngest adults, navigate the overflowing digital world? Well, unlike the previous generations, they are forging a new path for consuming information, one that relies less on traditional sources and more on trusted online communities. What does that mean? Our next report getting you the details. Take a look.
Gen Z faces an unprecedented information overload. Social media, constant news updates, and a barrage of online content bombard them daily. But unlike previous generations, Gen Z isn't focused on traditional information literacy, the ability to critically evaluate sources. Instead, researchers at Jigsaw, a Google subsidiary, found they rely on information sensibility. This means prioritizing trusted influencers and social circles for information, bypassing traditional fact-checking. Studies show Gen Z distrusts clickbait and avoids news sources with ads or paywalls. Instead, they seek out trusted online personalities, their digital queen bees and quarterback bros, who curate information and speak their language. Social media comments also play a crucial role. Gen Z views them as a community vetting system, using them to gauge the truthfulness of information and avoid potential cancel culture pitfalls. News consumption habits are also changing dramatically. Traditional media like newspapers are losing ground. A recent Pew Research Center study shows Gen Z primarily gets its news through social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok. These platforms often feature influencers who summarize and pre-digest news, creating a micro-news environment. Notably, TikTok users compared to other platforms reported being less overwhelmed by the news. While Gen Z's digital habits may differ from previous generations, it is not a sign of intellectual decline. They are adept at navigating the online world, prioritizing trusted social sources and engaging in active information sensibility. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
The outcome of Iran's election will be decisive for one key community, the country's women. Our correspondent Anas Malik getting you the special ground report on what the women of Iran have to say about the current conditions and their take on gender parity. Take a look.
The anti-hijab protests that rocked the Iranian establishment are still fresh in people's minds. Nearly 2 years since the protests began, there are reports that Iran once again pushed on with a crackdown over the headscarf ahead of the presidential polls. This amid mounting criticism over the country's treatment of its own citizens, particularly women. However, despite religious conservatism, Iran's women are adopting entrepreneurial and progressive lifestyles. The women in Iran have shown remarkable resilience to improve their status despite challenges.
My name is Ilahi. I was working as a laser technician. Unfortunately, ladies don't receive fair salary. This problem has economical, historical and cultural roots. We expect the new government to remove gender discrimination.
Unfair pay is not the only worry, but the women vow not to give up.
My name is Shima and I am a nurse. Because of the economic conditions, women should work shoulder to shoulder with the men irrespective of their relation with them. It is not possible for one person to run a household. There is gender discrimination in work, university and also the enforcement for hijab. Recently, it has gotten tougher. Women should work with or without obstacles, as I do, and so do other women in numbers do. In comparison, women are more successful compared to men. But there is always discrimination, for instance, when it comes to pay and salaries. Women do more, they work more, but they get paid lesser.
Women are an integral part of the Iranian society. They've been playing a dominant role in different fields, but they complain of gender discrimination that they have to face on an everyday basis and wider pay gap in comparison to the opposite gender. Anas Malik in Tehran, in Iran, for WION World is One.
Our next story is about the hijab-wearing rock stars of Glastonbury. You heard that right. A hijab-wearing metal trio that has become the first Indonesian band to play at Glastonbury Music Festival. The group is called Beko, and its members met at a school in West Java almost a decade ago, and since then they have been performing and challenging sexism together. Here's their story. Sporting their hijabs, the all-female members of Voice of Beko turned heads at the annual Glastonbury Festival. In various interviews with the media, the three young women have described their gig at Glastonbury as a truly surreal moment in their career. Indonesia's Tourism Minister Sandiaga Uno also congratulated them and called their performance a proud achievement for Indonesia. Now, for those unversed, WIOB are not only the first band from Indonesia, but also the first Indonesian band of young women wearing headscarves and playing heavy metal. The trio has played at many festivals, in fact, and toured cities across the US, Europe, Asia. WIOB, which was formed in 2014, consists of Widhi Ramavati, the vocalist, Firda Marcia Kurnia, the guitarist, and Ius Siti Aisyam, the drummer. In an interview, Marcia said they found their true calling when a teacher suggested that they should channelize their energies into an extracurricular activity like music. And heeding that advice, the girls joined an after-school program. They went through their music teacher's laptop and discovered various bands. System of a Down, Rage Against the Machine, the Red Hot Chili Peppers were some of the musical groups that inspired them to form a band. Unfortunately, the newfound passion did not go down well with their families. In fact, Siti's parents were initially opposed to her interest in music. She would return home at 5 p.m. after practice. It was frowned upon by the conservative members in her village. Widhi's parents were largely happy that music brought her out of her shell, but grew deeply concerned when she became obsessed with it. Marcia said her parents relented after they realized they could not keep her away from music. And soon the group started sharing their work on social media sites, which brought them wider international attention. And with this, they found opportunities to go on TV and perform at shows as well. After some continued successes, their parents started showing their support. All three members of the band are practicing Muslims and make it a point to pray together before they go on stage. Some of their detractors have used their religion to attack them by calling their music Haram or forbidden by Islam. The band is also keen to use their music to help shatter the image of Indonesia as an ultra-conservative Islamic nation. As Voice of Beko gains fame and acceptance globally, the band members say they have big plans for the future, and at present they wish to open their own studio in Garut so they could record their original music closer to home. A rare collection of sketches by Britain's Queen Victoria when she was a young girl, reflecting knights and veiled women and her viewpoint on royal domestic life. The young Victoria's paintings will be up for auction. Our next report telling you more. Shifting focus for now, the Queen of Gymnastics is returning to claim the throne that she abdicated at the Tokyo Olympics. Simone Biles will headline a star-studded American women's gymnastics team at the Paris Games after taking gold in the all-around at the US Olympic trials in Minneapolis. Four-time Olympic champion Biles clinched the lone automatic spot in the five-member team. This is her record 9th national title, and she is now a firm favorite to regain the Olympic gold that she won in 2016. Biles returned to competitive gymnastics after a 2-year break last August, and she has also won the World Championship gold since then. But she is still to regain that aura that preceded her ahead of the Tokyo Games 3 years ago. She did not have the greatest of landings while attempting the difficult Yurchenko double pike vault, and she also hopped off the beam after failing to land a side aerial. But she finished with a spectacular performance in her pet floor exercise routine and scored a combined score which was more than 5 points clear of 2020 Olympic champion Suni Lee.
The recovery. I definitely have to take care of recovery mentally, physically. After classics, I swore I couldn't walk. I was like hobbling to the plane, so that was exciting. After championships, I felt a little bit better. And after day one of trials, I was actually surprised I could walk. So I was like, whoo, I'm actually not as sore. I'm not hurting.
Baila's ordeal during the Tokyo Games has been well documented. In fact, she experienced the twisties, or a temporary loss of spatial awareness mid-air. She pulled out of multiple events to prioritize her mental health and physical well-being. She later revealed that she also was a victim of sexual predator Larry Nassar and put extra pressure on herself to perform and hold USA Gymnastics to account for not protecting her and her fellow survivors. And since then, she has put safeguards in place to ensure she stays in the perfect mind space. The 27-year-old sees a therapist weekly and is focused on life outside of gymnastics.
I never pictured going to another Olympic Games after Tokyo just because of the circumstances. I never thought I would go back in the gym again, be twisting, feel free.
India are T20 World Champions again. The triumph over South Africa finally ended a 13-year wait for a World Cup title. It also provided the perfect farewell for stalwarts Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli and Ravindra Jadeja from the shortest format of the game. With head coach Rahul Dravid also ending his stint, the triumph officially marks the start of a new era in Indian cricket. We take a look at